She dropped a folder of documents on the most dangerous man in Vancouver, and somehow that accident became the first honest conversation either of them had managed in years. Have you ever walked into a room and understood, without anyone saying a word, that you did not belong there? That was Nora Callahan on a wet Tuesday evening in November, standing in the marble lobby of Kestrel Capital's annual donor reception, with a catering badge clipped to her shirt and someone else's expensive coat dripping rain onto the floor behind her. She was 26, a forensic accounting student, working 3 jobs to stay enrolled at UBC, and she had taken the catering shift because the rent was due, and her scholarship appeal had been denied for the 2nd time that semester. She was not supposed to be seen. She was supposed to pour wine and disappear. Then the elevator doors opened and Remy Aldric walked out. The room shifted when he entered. Not dramatically, not like in a film where the music changes and everyone turns at once, subtly. The way a room shifts when the temperature drops by 5 degrees and nobody admits they felt it. Conversations lowered, shoulders straightened. 2 men near the bar laughed a little too quickly. At something Remy had not said. He moved through it all without appearing to notice, which Nora understood, later, was the most deliberate thing about him. He was 41, though you would not guess it from across a room. Dark suit, no tie, the kind of controlled stillness that read less like confidence and more like a man who had long ago stopped needing anything from the room he was walking into. The people around him smiled. He smiled back precisely. It did not reach anywhere. Nora was crossing from the kitchen with a tray of sparkling water when one of the junior associates stepped backward into her path without looking. The tray went sideways. The glasses did not break. The documents she had been asked to carry from the back office, because no one else was available, orientation packets for the event coordinators, scattered across the marble floor in a wide, graceless fan. She crouched immediately to gather them. Her knee protested from the old injury she never talked about. Her face went hot. Around her, people stepped over the papers without stopping. One heel came down on the corner of a page and tore it cleanly before the woman walked on. Then a hand appeared beside hers, gathering pages. Nora looked up. Remy Aldric was crouched 2 feet away from her on the lobby floor of his own event, collecting scattered documents with the same unhurried attention he had given the handshakes upstairs. He did not look embarrassed on her behalf, which was the thing she noticed first, because everyone else in the room had managed to look embarrassed for her. She took the pages from his hand. "I've got it, thank you." He looked at her. His eyes were the particular gray of Lake Ontario in February, cold in a way that had nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with distance. "The woman who stepped on your papers just went to find a drink," he said. "She won't apologize." "I know," Nora said. "I didn't expect her to." Something shifted in his expression, too small to name. He straightened and extended a hand to help her up. She stood on her own. He almost smiled. "Fair enough." His assistant appeared at his elbow then. A woman in her 30s who looked at Nora the way people looked at a delay in their schedule. Remy spoke to her briefly, something about the next meeting, and by the time Nora had the tray righted and the remaining glasses back in order, he was already moving toward the east corridor. She told herself it was nothing, a rich man being briefly decent. It happened sometimes. She did not think about the way he had looked at her like she was the only person in that lobby who had told him the truth. The drive home to East Van took 40 minutes by bus. Nora shared the back section with a man asleep across 2 seats and a teenager doing homework on a tablet with a cracked screen. She changed back into her own jacket in the coffee shop bathroom off Commercial before boarding. The catering badge went into her bag. By the time she got home, the apartment was cold because the radiator had decided again that Thursday was its day off. Her cat, a large and opinionated tabby named Hatch, was sitting on the stack of financial law textbooks she needed to read before Friday. He looked at her with the expression of a creature who found her life choices deeply unreasonable. "Don't start," Nora said, dropping her bag. "I made $42 and someone stepped on a government document I was responsible for." Hatch blinked, unhelpfully. She changed into old sweatpants, microwaved leftover lentil soup, and opened her laptop to the spreadsheet she had been building for her practicum audit, a pro bono assignment tracking irregularities in a local nonprofit's books. The numbers were familiar. They grounded her. In her life, when nothing balanced, she went looking for the reason, and the reason was always there if you looked with enough patience. She looked at the numbers until the soup went cold and the city outside went quiet. She did not check the news. She did not know yet that Kestrel Capital had been named in a leaked city planning document. She did not know that the reception she had just catered was the last public event Remy Aldric would attend before a federal inquiry began circling his company from the outside in. She did not know that someone at that event had photographed her crouched on the floor beside him, and that by morning the image would be moving across 3 gossip accounts with captions that said nothing true. Her roommate Priya found her at midnight still at the table. "Go to sleep," Priya said. "Your eyes are doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you're looking at numbers but you're actually thinking about something else." Nora closed the laptop. "I dropped a tray tonight." "Did anything break?" "No, then it's not a story. Go to bed." Nora went to bed. She lay in the dark listening to the radiator click and thought about the way a man had crouched on a marble floor to pick up papers that were not his problem. She told herself it meant nothing. She almost believed it. The photograph appeared on her phone at 7:43 the next morning while she was eating toast over the sink. Priya had sent it with a single question mark. It had already been shared 200 times. The caption read, "Remy Aldric's mystery date at the Kestrel Gala." Nora set down her toast. "I was wearing a catering badge," she said to no one. By 8, her cohort group chat had been active for 20 minutes. By 8:15, her practicum supervisor had left a voicemail that was carefully worded and deeply uncomfortable. By 8:30, Nora was sitting on the bus to campus with her headphones in and the volume at 0, staring at her own blurred face on a screen, trying to decide which part of this she was most angry about. She settled on the part where no one had asked. Her supervisor, Dr. Emmett, met with her that afternoon. He was not unkind, but he was cautious in the way. Institutions taught people to be cautious, which looked almost identical to cowardice when you were on the wrong side of it. He said the optics were complicated. He said the faculty had a responsibility to maintain objectivity. He said her practicum placement might need to be reviewed. Nora sat across from him with her hands flat on her thighs. "I was catering," she said. "I was working. I understand that, do you?" Dr. Emmett looked at his desk. "I'd like to give this a few days before we make any decisions." Nora took the bus home. She did not cry until she was in the stairwell of her building, 3 floors from the top, where she sat on the steps for 4 minutes, before deciding she was too tired to stay upset in a stairwell when she could be upset at a table with tea. The envelope arrived 3 days later. It was slid under the apartment door overnight, a thick cream rectangle with no return address. Inside was a printed receipt for the torn document from the event, fully replaced and filed on her behalf, along with a handwritten note on Kestrel capital letterhead. "The damage to the orientation package has been addressed. The photograph was not authorized and a request has been submitted to have it removed. Neither incident was your fault. It was not signed, but the handwriting was decisive and even, the kind that belonged to a person who rarely wrote things down and meant every word when he did." Nora read it twice. Then she put it in the drawer with her lease agreement and her scholarship correspondence. Because she filed important things. And this felt, in ways she was not ready to examine, like an important thing. She did not call the number embossed at the bottom of the letterhead. She was not sure what she would say. She was sure that calling would make something real that she was not certain should be real. Then Priya read the note over her shoulder at breakfast and said, "He found out where you live." Nora looked at the drawer. "Yes. That's either very thoughtful or very alarming. I know. Which one are you leaning toward?" Nora poured coffee. "Ask me again in a week." She called the number at the end of that week on a Friday evening from the fire escape where the reception was better and Hatch could not judge her in person. Remy answered on the second ring. "Callahan." He said her last name like he had already decided what it meant, which should have annoyed her and instead made her straighten her spine. "You found my address." "I found the event logistics file. Your details were in it." "That's a narrow distinction. It's an accurate one." A pause. "Did the faculty review resolve?" Nora looked at the lights across the street. A couple argued on a second-floor balcony 2 buildings over, something about a parking spot. The city was loud and ordinary and indifferent. "Provisionally. They're watching. That's not a resolution." "No, but it's what I have." She waited. The line stayed quiet in a way that felt like listening rather than absence. "Why did you send the note?" "Because what happened was preventable and no one else seemed interested in preventing it." "You don't know me." "No," Remy said, "I don't." Another pause, shorter. "I'd like to fix that." Nora sat with that for a moment. Below her, a delivery cyclist braked hard to avoid a car and swore impressively in at least 2 languages. "You understand that everything this situation is professionally problematic for me." "Yes, and that I'm not interested in being managed." "I don't manage people. I have staff for that." That's not reassuring, I know. The words were dry, almost wry. Coffee somewhere you choose. I'll find my own way there. Nora thought about the marble floor, about a man who did not wait for someone else to pick up the mess. Kafka's, she said. It's on Clark. It has no reserved seating, and the coffee takes 20 minutes because the owner argues with everyone. I'll find it. She almost smiled. Good luck. Kafka's Cafe was the kind of place that had not changed its menu since 2009 and was very proud of this. The tables were mismatched, the chairs were painted different colors, and the owner, a Latvian-Canadian man named Andris, who had opinions about everything, including how long a person should hold a door open, ran the counter like a benevolent dictatorship. Nora had been coming since her second year of undergrad. It was hers in the way that a place becomes yours when you've eaten a lot of cheap meals there, and cried there once or twice, and always tipped well. She arrived early and ordered black coffee and watched the door. Remy Aldric walked in at exactly the agreed time, looked around a room full of mismatched chairs and vintage skating posters, and sat across from her like he had been coming to Kafka's for years. Andris appeared with a laminated menu. You look like an espresso man. Remy looked at Nora. She said nothing. He looked back at Andris. What do you recommend? Andris pointed to a handwritten item at the bottom of the specials board. The Latvian honey cake. It is not on the menu. Most people don't ask. Then I'll have that. Andris nodded slowly, as if a test had been passed, and left. Nora wrapped her hands around her mug. He's going to talk about his grandmother for 12 minutes now. Remy glanced after him. Is that standard? Only if he likes you? The honey cake arrived in 9 minutes, a personal record. Andris spoke about his grandmother for 11. After Andris retreated, Remy ate the cake with the focused attention of a man who took things seriously, and Nora decided this was both endearing and faintly absurd. Tell me about the inquiry, she said. He looked up. The city planning document, the Federal Review. She kept her voice even. It's public record, partially. I read what I could find. Remy set down his fork. Most people don't lead with that. Most people aren't forensic accounting students. She held his gaze. I'm not going to pretend I didn't look. He considered her for a moment in the way he had in the lobby, like someone recalibrating. The inquiry is about contracts awarded to a development subsidiary I divested from 4 years ago. The work was done before I took operational control. The irregularities, if there are any, predate my tenure. Do you believe that, or do you know it? The question landed. She saw it. He said, both. But I understand why someone might want proof before accepting the difference. Good, Nora said, because I would. There was a long pause. Someone at the counter dropped a spoon. Andris said something in Latvian that sounded reproachful. Remy said, Why did you take the catering job? Because my scholarship appeal was denied and the rent is not negotiable. He did not look sorry for her. He looked like someone absorbing information and deciding what to do with it. She appreciated that more than pity would have cost him. And the practicum is the only accredited forensic track in BC that doesn't require me to already be employed by a firm. I can't afford to lose it. She said it plainly. It was the truth. She had long since stopped dressing the truth in anything softer than it actually was. Remy looked at the table, then at her. If the review affects your placement, I want to know. Why? Because I can do something about it. I don't want you to do something about it. The words came fast, automatic, from the place in her where independence had calcified into armor a long time ago. Then she made herself be fairer. I mean, I understand the offer, but I need my record to be mine. If I get through this, it has to be because I earned it. He was quiet for a moment. I understand that, he said, and she could tell he did, not as a polite concession, but in the way of a person who had made a similar choice at some point and knew what it cost. They talked for 2 hours. She learned that he had grown up in Sudbury, that his father had worked the mines, that he had put himself through Dalhousie on a combination of scholarships and summer construction work. She did not know what to do with the fact that his origin story was legible to her in ways she had not anticipated. He learned that she had moved to Vancouver from Moncton at 19, that her mother was a palliative care nurse, that she named her cat Hatch after a Stompin' Tom song and would not explain further. When they left, the rain had turned serious. He offered his coat. She refused. He did not argue, which she filed away as a point in his favor. I enjoyed tonight, he said, under the awning. Even the 11 minutes about the grandmother. Especially that. He turned up his collar against the rain. I'd like to see you again. Nora looked at him. The street was wet and bright and full of other people's lives rushing past. That sounds like a complicated idea. Probably. You're not arguing. I'm not in the habit of arguing with accurate assessments. He looked at her steadily. I'll wait. She walked to the bus stop without looking back. On the ride home, she pressed her forehead against the cold glass and thought about a man who had gone to the floor of his own lobby to pick up her scattered pages and had not mentioned it again. She thought about it for most of the next week. The second meeting happened because she called him, which she had not planned. She was at the library at 11, at night the only person left in the graduate reading room, when she pulled up a Kestrel Capital subsidiary filing from 3 years earlier, and something in the column structure stopped her. She almost closed the tab. It was not her file. It was not her assignment. She called anyway. He answered on the first ring. "Callahan, I'm looking at a subsidiary filing from 2021, she said. "Harwick Developments, it's connected to the inquiry." Silence. "Then where did you find it?" "BC Registry, it's public, but the capital flow structure is unusual. The reported losses are real, but the timing of the write-offs is misaligned with the asset dispositions. Someone was moving money in a pattern." Remy said nothing for a moment. "You found this tonight." "I wasn't looking for it. I was working on something else and the name came up in a footnote." She stared at the screen. "You didn't know about this?" "I knew the subsidiary was problematic. I didn't know about the write-off pattern. Someone inside the company structured it deliberately. The losses are a shell. They're covering a payment stream." She hesitated. "Remy, this isn't old irregularity. This was being maintained." The silence that followed was different from the pauses she had come to recognize from him. This one had weight. "I'm sending you the files," she said. "What you do with them is your business. But if the inquiry digs far enough in the wrong direction, they're going to find something that looks like it belongs to you." "I don't think it does." She heard him exhale slowly. "How long would it take you to map the full structure? Give me the internal ledgers and a week. I'll send them through counsel tonight." "Remy," he paused. "If this goes anywhere, I need to be a source, not an accessory. My name stays out of it until there's something to attach it to that I can stand behind." "Understood." Then quieter, "Thank you." She sat in the empty reading room for a long time after they hung up. Hatch was not there to judge her. That did not mean no one was. The ledgers arrived the next morning via secured transfer from a law firm downtown. Nora made coffee and cleared the kitchen table and began. Numbers, unlike people, did not perform innocence. They just sat there, and if something was wrong, you found it the same way you always found anything, by being patient and looking in the right places. By the end of the third day, she had the shape of it. The subsidiary, Harwick, had been used by a man named Dale Kirsch, a former VP of operations who had left Kestrel Capital 18 months ago under terms that were described publicly as a mutual departure. The real terms, visible in the ledger patterns and the cross-referenced payment records, were something else. Kirsch had been skimming through inflated contractor invoices for 4 years, layering the transactions under legitimate project costs. The structure was clever, the kind of clever that required someone inside to build and someone inside to ignore. The second name took her longer to find. She was on her 4th cup of coffee at midnight when she found it, not in a ledger entry but in a document amendment from 2020, a change to a subsidiary operating agreement that had been filed quietly and routed through a numbered company in Alberta. The amendment gave Kirsch's extraction structure a second layer of protection. The person who had authorized the amendment was listed under a director code rather than a name. It took her another hour to trace the director code back, through 3 registry filings, to a man named Patrick Sorrell, who served on the board of a civic infrastructure fund that had awarded 3 contracts to Harwick Developments in the same period the skim was running. Patrick Sorrell, who was currently advising the federal inquiry. Nora sat back from the table. Hatch had moved from the textbooks to the chair beside her at some point in the last hour, and was now pressed against her arm, which was as close as he got to expressing concern. She picked up her phone. It was 12:43 in the morning. She called Remy. He answered immediately. "Sorrell," she said. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. "I see it. He's advising the inquiry he helped build the conditions for." "Yes." Remy's voice had gone to the place it went when he was containing something large and choosing how to set it down. "Are you certain? The director code traces through 2 shells and a registry filing with a timestamp that predates his board appointment by 6 weeks. He positioned himself before the structure was complete." She paused. "This is not going to be easy to bring forward. No, if you go to your lawyers and they go to the inquiry, Sorrell will know before morning." "I know, so you need to go somewhere else first." She thought about it. "Revenue Canada, not the inquiry. And you need to do it before the next site inspection, which is scheduled for Thursday," Remy said. Then you have 36 hours to determine who inside C-Ray is not connected to Sorrel's network and get this in front of them. Remy was quiet for a moment. You mapped all of this in 3 days. I had good source material and a reason to be thorough. You also had no reason to keep going after you found Kirsch. Nora looked at the papers spread across her table. That's not true. I had every reason. The frame you were being set up with belongs to someone. Frames don't build themselves. He said her name once, just her first name, just Nora, in a way that was different from the way he said Callahan. She looked away from the table toward the window where the city was still going at nearly 1 in the morning, lit and unaware. I'll call counsel, he said. The right ones, yes, and Remy, she waited. When this lands, they're going to write about you, about your family, about everything Kestrel has done and half of what it hasn't. That's going to be loud, I know, and they're going to write about me. A pause. I know that too. His voice stayed level but not cold. I'm sorry, I'm not asking for an apology. I'm telling you I understand it's coming, so that you don't try to manage it when it does. I won't. Good. She hung up and sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by her own work, which was, she thought, the strangest and most honest version of herself she had offered to anyone in a long time. The days that followed were not clean. Revenue Canada moved in the way large institutions move, carefully and by stages. Remy's counsel filed the materials through channels that kept Sorrel out of the loop long enough for the initial review to begin. The site inspection on Thursday was quietly postponed. Kirsch's accounts were flagged, then frozen. The press got pieces of it before they understood the whole shape, which meant the first week of coverage was fractured and wrong in specific ways, some of which put Nora in the center of the story in ways she had not been prepared for. Someone published the photograph from the lobby again. Someone else called her a whistleblower, and someone else, after that, called her something less flattering and more gendered. She went to campus anyway. She walked in through the main door, bought a coffee from the cart at the bottom of the atrium, and sat in the back of her corporate governance lecture like a person who had not been named in 4 media outlets since Monday. Dr. Emmett stopped her in the hall afterward. His face had changed since their last meeting. I owe you an apology, he said. Nora looked at him. The practicum review has been closed. The faculty reviewed the situation in full and determined your conduct was appropriate throughout. He paused. I should have said so sooner. You should have, Nora said. But I understand that institutions take time. She did not wait for him to add anything to that. Remy called that evening from a number she did not recognize. Where are you? She said. In a car outside your building. I would have texted, but I wasn't sure you'd answer. She went to the window. A dark gray sedan sat at the curb, engine running. Come up, 3rd floor. The elevator sticks on 2. She buzzed him in. He knocked and she opened the door, and he looked tired in a way she had not seen on him before. Not exhausted exactly, but worn, like a thing that had been under sustained pressure and had held its shape and was not going to perform ease about what that had cost. Sorrel resigned this afternoon, he said. I saw. The board is meeting Friday. Kirsch's civil liability is separate from the federal matter. He stepped inside. Hatch appeared from the bedroom, sat 6 feet away, and regarded Remy with the solemn evaluation of a creature who had heard about him and was reserving judgment. That's Hatch, Nora said. Remy looked at the cat, then slowly he crouched down. Hatch walked over and smelled his hand, then sat back down. It was a provisional approval. Remy straightened. I came to say that the board wants to acknowledge your contribution formally. They're discussing a consulting credit, properly compensated. You can tell them I'll consider it. She moved toward the kitchen. Are you hungry? I have soup. He blinked. You made soup. I make soup when I'm stressed. It's the lentil kind. It's not impressive. I'd like some. They sat at the same kitchen table where she had mapped the Harwick structure 3 days earlier, the sticky notes still faintly visible in the corners of the surface where she had pulled them off. Remy ate the soup without commentary except to say, once, that it was good, which he said like someone who meant it, and did not feel the need to explain. After she washed the bowls and he stayed at the table, and the apartment was quiet in the way that is only comfortable with someone you have already been through something with. My father worked a nickel mine for 22 years, he said. He got sick at 60. We spent the last 18 months of his life fighting an insurance claim that should have been automatic. He looked at the table. I spent a decade building Kestrel because I believed that if something had enough structural integrity, it couldn't be corrupted from the inside. I was wrong about that. Nora turned from the sink. You built it anyway, after my father, yes. He looked up. Kestrel's urban agriculture initiative, the one that started the second year, those contracts went to co-ops in Sudbury and Thunder Bay. I don't talk about that. Why not? Because it sounds like performance if you explain it. Nora looked at him. The kitchen light was too bright, the kind that showed every line and shadow. She found she did not mind. You're not what the inquiry was going to say you were, she said. No, he paused. But I'm not uncomplicated, I know. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Neither am I. He looked at her for a long moment. I know you didn't do this for me. I did it because the numbers were wrong and I am physically incapable of leaving wrong numbers alone. I know that too. The corner of his mouth moved. I'm still grateful. She looked at the table, at the faint marks from the sticky notes, at her hands. There's going to be more coverage, she said. Yes, my name is going to be attached to this. I can try to. No, she said. Don't manage it. I told you. She looked up. Let me decide what my name gets attached to. He held her gaze. There was something in his face that she had seen once before, on the lobby floor, that quality of a person waiting to be told the truth rather than a polished version of it. All right. I'm going to finish my practicum, she said. I'm going to write the thesis. And if the board's consulting offer is real, I'll negotiate the terms myself. I'd expect nothing else. And I'm going to need you to understand that any part of this that's mine stays mine. The work, the credit, the decisions. Understood. Good. She moved to stand. He said it quietly, just her name the way he had on the phone at midnight. I'd like to keep seeing you. Not as a source, not as a consultant. He paused. Just this. Whatever this is. She looked at him across the kitchen table with the bad overhead light and the half-repaired radiator clanging once like it was agreeing with something. That's going to be complicated, she said. I know. I'm not easy to manage. I've noticed, and I will absolutely side with Hatch in any dispute. He looked at the cat who had materialized in the doorway at the sound of his name and was sitting with his tail wrapped around his feet waiting. That seems fair, Remy said. Nora pulled on her jacket from the hook by the door. Walk me to the corner. I need air and I want to think. He stood without asking what that meant. Outside, the rain had stopped and left everything washed and quiet. The streetlights made the pavement shine. They walked 1 block without speaking, and it was the most honest conversation she had had in weeks. At the corner he stopped, and she stopped, and the city went on around them in its familiar, indifferent way. I'll think about it, she said. I'll be here, he said, without making it a demand. She turned toward home. At the end of the block, she looked back once. He was still at the corner, hands in his pockets, not watching her in the way that men watch women they want to follow, but in the way of someone who has decided to trust that she knows her own way and is grateful she left a light on somewhere he can see. She faced forward again and walked home under the clear Vancouver sky, and for the first time in a very long time the city felt like it had enough room for all of who she was. It was 3 months before the Federal Review formally cleared Kestrel Capital of liability in the Harwick matter, and 7 months before Nora submitted her practicum report, which was the most thorough forensic audit the faculty had reviewed in 6 years, according to Dr. Emmett, who said so in writing this time. The consulting arrangement with Kestrel's board was negotiated over 2 meetings. Nora brought her own legal counsel, a woman named Frances who had represented labor unions for 20 years and had the handshake of someone who had settled difficult rooms. The terms were fair, the credit was documented, the hourly rate was non-negotiable. Remy did not attend either meeting. He said it was her business and he meant it. He did, however, bring coffee to the second meeting, left it at the reception desk with a note that said only good luck which you don't need, and left before anyone thought to thank him. Frances read the note twice, looked at Nora and said nothing. That was a form of commentary. They did not move quickly. That was Nora's choice and he made no case against it. They met on Tuesday evenings at Kafka's where Andres had decided Remy was trustworthy after the 4th visit and began saving him the honey cake without being asked. They walked along the seawall on Saturdays when the weather allowed, which in Vancouver meant when the rain was merely light rather than committed. He told her about the agriculture initiative, and she told him about Moncton and her mother's night shifts and the year she had eaten peanut butter sandwiches for 6 months, because they were 15 cents cheaper per serving than anything else at the grocery store. He did not say he was sorry about that. He said, once, that she had built something real from a difficult start, and she understood that was different. When the story finally settled into the background the way stories do, when the coverage moved on and the inquiry reports became footnotes, and Kirsch's case entered the slow machinery of civil litigation, Nora opened her own practice on the 2nd floor of a building in Mount Pleasant above a print shop that smelled of ink and warm paper. The sign on the door was made properly, not taped behind glass. Callahan Forensic Accounting, Independent Review. Fraud detection, small business support. The first morning she unlocked it. She stood in the empty room and listened to the building. Traffic below, the print shop starting its machines. A bird somewhere, confused about the season. Remy arrived 20 minutes later with a plant. It was a lemon tree, small and potted in good clay, its leaves clean and particular. She looked at him in the doorway. No, it's a plant, it's a statement, it's a lemon tree. It does well in indirect light. He looked at the windows. You have indirect light. You brought a lemon tree to my professional office. I brought it from the roof garden at the house. It's been there 3 years. It's earned a window. He set it carefully on the sill without asking permission, which was exactly audacious enough to be funny. He looked at her with the steadiness she had come to know meant he was serious underneath whatever restraint he was wearing. Things should grow where there is work being done. Nora looked at the tree, at him, at the empty room that was hers. I'm naming it, she said. Of course, Stompin' Tom. He was quiet for a moment. After the musician, after the principal. She crossed the room and adjusted the pot by 2 inches because it looked better near the seam of the light and also because it was her office and she would place things as she pleased. Remy watched her do it without comment, which was, she had learned, one of the finest things he was capable of. Stay for the first hour, she said. There's coffee from the place downstairs. Then I'm working and you're leaving. Understood. She made the coffee. He sat in the folding chair near the wall, the only chair in the room, and read something on his phone without making it her problem. The morning light came in clean and particular across the wood floor. Stompin' Tom sat in the window, green and unbothered, doing exactly what it was built to do. Nora opened her laptop and began. Outside, Vancouver went on with its foggy, salt-aired, impossible life. Inside, at the only desk in a room that still smelled of fresh paint and possibility, a woman who had spent years being invisible in other people's expensive rooms did the work she was made for, in a space that had her name on the door. And at the folding chair near the wall, a man who had spent 40 years learning how to hold a room by force was learning, slowly and without complaint, what it felt like to be held by something he had not built and could not control, and to find, to his considerable surprise, that it was the steadiest ground he had ever stood on.